We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now, I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany, too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values, we must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone.
Have such a categorically different view of European democracy than you do.
I think it's important that we understand.
But President Trump yesterday called the speech brilliant and said he agreed with it. What are the consequences for US-German relations when the American president and vice president have such a categorically different view of European democracy than you do?
I think it's important that we understand that Germany is a very strong democracy. And as a strong democracy, we are absolutely clear that the extreme right should be out of political control and out of political decision-making processes, and that there will be no cooperation with them. And we really reject any idea of cooperation between parties, other parties, and these extreme right parties. I think there is a strong consensus between all relevant parties in Germany that they won't do so. I hope this will last and continue. But it is absolutely sure and necessary to say it is not others to give us the advice to cooperate with these parties which we are not working with for good reasons, especially when looking to the history of our country.
Do you think there was anything in the Vice President's speech worth reflecting on?
You mean all this very relevant as discussions about Ukraine and security in Europe?
I think you've answered my question, but I mean it somewhat seriously. Was there anything in that speech which was a broadside against many aspects of Europe that you think is criticism worth reflecting on?
I think, aside of the questions we are discussing here, we should be very clear that free speech in Europe means that you are not attacking others in ways that are against legislation and laws we have in our country. And that's the case. There is no difference between the digital world and the analog world, to say it like this. And we have to be very clear that hate and all this, which is so bad for our societies, should be not the reality of public debate.
Thank you. Let's turn to the subjects that I think you hoped the Vice President would address yesterday. Let's turn first to actually defense spending, which you made some very strong points just now about what you thought needed to be the scale of defense spending and what needed to change in Germany in order to pay for it, particularly the debt brake. Will this be, you said, you said there was a majority in this country after the election. Does that mean you think it should be a condition of any coalition agreement that there should be a reform of the debt brake?
To my point, it's necessary that we change the view we have to these questions since many years. It will be absolutely impossible to finance 2% and even more without changing the debt regulation we have in Germany. It is impossible. And we helped us out of the situation with this extra fund of 100 billion, which gave us the opportunity to do the necessary investments and to have more than 2% of GDP invested into defense now. And we will be able to continue, but this fund ends in 27. And then we have to take a decision for the next future. And it will be not that we raise taxes by 30 billion. And it will be not that we cut investments into streets and railways and investments into the future of our society or in social cohesion because of doing more for defense. So it is absolutely clear that without a change in the view of looking at this debt regulation, we wouldn't be able to fulfill the request of 2%, and even we wouldn't be absolutely unable to do more. And this is the same with many other countries in Europe, and that's the reason why I said we have to rethink also in Europe the question, and my concrete proposal here is that we think that when it goes over 2%, we have to have something where our criteria of that regulation are not against spending.
Absolutely, and you echoed comments made by Ursula von der Leyen yesterday where she proposed something similar. Can I just clarify though, both on the European side and with the debt brake, is this a permanent change? Should defense spending permanently be excluded from the debt brake?
I think it should be for a long time and possibly permanently. We have to discuss this together, but we have to be very clear, it is not for doing new pension schemes. This is something we have to afford with our own capabilities in our countries. But if you look around the world, you will not find too many countries that are able to do even that much for defense if they are not using also their chances for going to finance with sovereign bonds and the like. And so it is absolutely necessary that we are clear on this question. And I'm really, really a bit disgusted that we have, especially in my country, but also in other places, the idea that it's something which we will be able to do just in a way. It will not happen. If we are not serious, if we are not honest with the people, telling them that spending more for defense will mean that we have to increase also the debt we have, we will not succeed, and it is then something we wouldn't do. And that's the reason why so many countries in Europe did not fulfill the 2% criterion, why they were not able to do it without acting against the cohesion of their own society. And I can tell you, I spoke with many leaders in Europe, and when behind the door, when the doors are closed, they are absolutely clear. If I would do this, I would have no chance to convince my public. And so we have to be honest in this case, and all these not honest debates are the problem for a real decision. They were in the past, and if there would not be, to be very clear, if there would not be this war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, nearly every country would have said we look for the 2% without doing anything. And this should not happen again, that we meet in Wales, everyone is signing a document about 2% and not doing a bit for getting there. When I started in office as a finance minister, the budget of the defense ministry was 37 billion. Now it is, together with the extra fund, nearly 80, together with the defense spending and other resource like foreign office and so on, it is 90 that we spend. So what sort of an increase we had in the past, we would not have been able to do this without the extra fund, and we will not be able to do it without extra debt. And we have the chance for doing so. Just tell this. Everyone in G7 has a debt to GDP ratio of over 100%, but Germany. We are going down to 60. United States are above 120. Italy is above 140. Japan is above 200 something. So that's the reality we are facing. We have the strength, we have the power, and we have the economic capabilities to do what is necessary.
You've put this very starkly and very clearly, and I think it's a very strong argument you make that politicians have not leveled with their publics. Have you done enough to level with the German public, perhaps before today? Because do you think the German public is ready for the scale of defense increased spending that you say is necessary?
Yes, I think so, because there is a broad support for all those saying we should do more. But there is a reason why it did not happen in the past, and this is what I explained. But if we would tell the people this would mean cuttings of 30 billion, 40 billion a year in all the necessary things to be done in the country, they will not agree. So it is the only possibility to do something which is about these regulations we have.
Can I just turn in our last questions to something more short-term? President Trump has clearly signaled that he would like to get President Putin around the negotiating table and do this quite quickly. The next weeks, months are going to be very important. You have an election next weekend. If the polls are to be believed, you are unlikely to win this election.
This was the same last time. But I won.
But you will be Chancellor until a new coalition agreement is formed. For the outside world, how will Germany speak with one voice? How will Germany be a credible partner in the coming weeks and months if there is no clarity around what the next government will be, or indeed what their positions will be? How will you ensure that you can be the leading voice in Europe in the next weeks and months?
This is a long tradition in Germany, that the cooperation, even between parties that are fighting against each other in elections, is strong enough that we always look at our country and how we represent it in a situation like this. So I have no doubt that we will be able to act with a broad consensus in Germany.
So you will be working together to ensure that you have an...
We did all the time. And why should this not be the case again? And so I'm very sure.
Yeah, it's just that this is a particularly delicate time with particularly consequential decisions being made.
But this is one of the achievings of the German constitutional framework, where we learned our lessons from the Weimar Republic. We have a very strong government that always is able to act, and we have a broad consensus between the democratic parties about the need of transatlantic partnership, of peace and security in Europe, so that I think that we will be able to do all what is necessary with a sort of consensus that also gives the legitimacy for what you can do.
It's unclear from the various comments from the Trump administration precisely what their approach is going to be towards Ukraine and towards Vladimir Putin. But one consistent theme seems to be a greater role for Europe, a less role for America in supporting Ukraine. If they take the radical end of that, which is really pulling back from any American support, is Germany, in particular, and Europe willing and able categorically to step up?
I do not understand the United States administrations in this direction. So even what we heard from the defense minister, what we heard from many others, and also from the president, is that they will continue to support Ukraine. This was also what I learned from my talks I had with President Trump when we were discussing especially the situation in Ukraine. And everyone should know, and I think the United States administration knows, that it is also an important and necessary message to Putin that he cannot count on a reduction of the support, because otherwise he would not do the necessary compromises. And